Alright, I never thought I'd be the type of guy to post something like this online, but here I am. I've been lurking on Reddit for years, reading other people's stories, cheating stories, crazy family drama, betrayals you wouldn't believe, and thinking, man, glad that's not me. But life has a funny way of humbling you. Let me start from the beginning. I've been married to my wife, Emily, for almost 7 years. We met in college, fell hard and fast, and honestly, I thought we were one of those couples that other people looked at and said, they've got it all figured out. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I had a decent job in IT, she worked in marketing, and about 3 years ago, we had our daughter, Lily. That little girl became my whole world. I don't even know how to describe it. Before Lily, I didn't even think I wanted kids. But once she arrived, everything shifted. I'd rush home from work just to catch her giggles before bedtime. And here's the thing, I was proud. Proud of being a husband, proud of being a dad. Like, I wore that title on my chest. Which is why what I found out recently completely destroyed me. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story is about betrayal. About the kind of truth you don't see coming even when it's staring you in the face. And it all started with something so small, so random, that I almost ignored it. It started at Lily's doctor's appointment. The pediatrician was doing the usual stuff, weight, height, blood pressure, when she mentioned something that didn't make sense. Just one little comment that planted the seed of doubt in my head. A doubt that grew and grew until it changed everything I thought I knew about my life. And honestly, I wish I had never gone to that appointment. So, here's what happened at that doctor's appointment. The pediatrician, Dr. Morris, was talking about family medical history. You know, the standard stuff. Does anyone in the family have diabetes, heart disease, allergies, blah blah? Emily answered most of the questions because honestly, she's better at remembering that stuff than I am. But then Dr. Morris looked at me and asked, any history of sickle cell anemia in your family? I shook my head immediately. Nope, none at all. Pretty sure we've never had anything like that. And then she gave me this look. Not a bad look, just curious. She said, that's interesting, because Lily's blood work shows she's a carrier. Now, I didn't even know what that meant at the time, so I just shrugged and said something dumb like, huh, maybe it skipped a generation or something. But Emily's reaction, yeah, that was the first red flag I didn't realize was a red flag at the time. She froze. Literally froze. She smiled quickly, covered it up, and said, oh, maybe it's from my side. But the thing is, Emily is pale as paper. Her whole family's history is basically Irish and German. No record of anything like that. I brushed it off at first, because who the hell sits there and thinks, oh, my kid might not be mine, in the middle of a pediatric checkup? That's the stuff of bad soap operas, not real life. But later that night, when I replayed the scene in my head, I couldn't stop thinking about Emily's face when the doctor said it. That flicker of panic before she covered it up. It gnawed at me. And when something gnaws at you long enough, eventually you start digging. That was the beginning of the end. That night, after Emily and Lily had gone to bed, I sat on the couch in the dark with my laptop open. I couldn't stop myself. I typed sickle cell trait inheritance into Google. And there it was, plain as day. To be a carrier, Lily had to inherit the gene from at least one parent. Simple enough. But here's the kicker. Neither Emily's family nor mine had any record of it. The percentages, the charts, the medical diagrams, they all pointed to the same thing. Something didn't add up. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. That maybe Emily just didn't know about some long-lost ancestor. That I was being paranoid. But then I remembered her face again. Wide eyes, that nervous swallow, the way she rushed to explain. And my gut whispered the truth I didn't want to hear. This isn't a coincidence. The next few days were torture. I'd look at Lily and feel my heart ache because she's my whole world. At the same time, this ugly little voice in my head kept asking, but is she really yours? I hated myself for even thinking it. I hated Emily for putting me in a position where I had to wonder. By the end of that week, I couldn't take it anymore. I started watching Emily closer. Not like full-on detective mode at first, but subtle things. Who was she texting? Why did she suddenly put her phone face down when she never used to? Why did she work late twice that week? And then, one night, when she went to shower, I did something I never thought I'd do in a million years. I picked up her phone. And what I found there made my stomach drop to the floor. So, I opened her phone. My hands were literally shaking. I felt like some paranoid creep, but something inside me told me I had to look. I didn't even have to dig far. Right there in her messages was a thread with a guy named Mark. I knew the name, vaguely. He was one of those people who always hung around at her office events. I never thought much of him. Just another face in the crowd. But the messages? Oh man. They weren't just friendly. They were intimate. Not full-on sex, but enough. Stuff like, I miss you too. Wish I could see you without all the sneaking around. Sometimes I look at her and wonder if he knows. That one hit me like a freight train. If he knows, what the hell was I supposed to make of that? I scrolled and scrolled, my chest tightening with every word. Most of it was emotional, talking about how hard it was, how guilty she felt, how he doesn't deserve this. That last one made me want to throw the phone through the wall. And then, buried deeper in the conversation, was the line that ended me. You know she has your eyes. I swear to God, I stopped breathing for a second. My vision blurred, and I had to put the phone down before I broke it in half. That was the moment everything shattered. Lily, the little girl who made me feel like the proudest dad in the world, might not even be mine. I sat there in the dark, her phone glowing in my hands, and all I could think was, how long has this been going on? How long have I been living a lie? I didn't confront her right then. I couldn't. I was too stunned, too wrecked. Instead, I just sat in silence, listening to the shower run, feeling like the floor had dropped out from under me. And in that silence, a terrible decision formed in my head. If I was going to get the truth, I needed more than just words on a screen. I needed proof. After reading those messages, I couldn't just sit back and pretend everything was fine. But at the same time, I didn't want to blow up my marriage or my daughter's life over a hunch. I needed solid proof. Something undeniable. So, the next day, I went into full detective mode. Not proud of it, but when your whole world feels like it's hanging by a thread, you do things you never thought you'd do. First move, I ordered a paternity test online. One of those at-home DNA kits. It was easy enough. Swab my cheek, swab Lily's cheek, send it off. But here's the thing. I didn't tell Emily. I couldn't. The way she'd panic if I even hinted about it told me all I needed to know. Second move, I started paying attention to her work late nights. I didn't tell her, but I followed her once. I know it sounds insane, but I had to. And guess what? She wasn't at the office. She was at a bar on the other side of town, sitting in a booth with Mark. I swear, watching them together through the window felt like I was stabbing myself in the gut. She wasn't even trying that hard to hide it. Her hand on his, leaning in close, laughing at whatever the hell he was saying. That wasn't a colleague. That was someone she was comfortable with. I didn't storm in. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Because again, I wanted her lies to corner her, not my words. When she came home that night, she kissed me on the cheek, told me she was exhausted from work, and went straight to bed. And I just stood there, staring at her, wondering how the hell she could lie so easily to my face. Meanwhile, the test results were in the mail. And let me tell you, waiting for that envelope was the longest week of my life. The envelope came on a Thursday afternoon. Plain white package, nothing special about it. Except inside, it held the answer to whether my life was real or a complete lie. I almost didn't open it. I just stared at it on the counter, my heart pounding so hard I felt sick. Part of me wanted to burn it and pretend everything was fine. Pretend Lily was mine. Pretend Emily hadn't been sneaking around. Just pretend. But the other part of me, the one that had been sleepless for weeks, the one that had watched her with him through that bar window, knew I couldn't live in the dark anymore. So I tore it open. I sat at the kitchen table, hands shaking, and unfolded the paper. My eyes darted straight to the bold letters in the middle of the page. Probability of paternity, 0%. I swear I felt the air leave my body. Like I'd been punched so hard in the chest that I couldn't breathe. Lily. My Lily. The little girl who called me daddy, who I'd rocked to sleep, who I thought had my smile, wasn't even mine. I sat there in silence, the paper crumpling in my fists as tears burned down my face. It wasn't just the betrayal. It was the loss. Because in one piece of paper, I went from being a dad to what? A stranger? I couldn't look at Emily when she came home that night. I couldn't even fake it anymore. I just handed her the paper, my hands still shaking, and said, "Explain this." Her face went pale. She didn't even try to deny it. And what she confessed next made me realize I had only uncovered half the story. When I handed Emily the results, she didn't even reach for the paper. She just stared at it like it was radioactive. Her lips trembled, and then she covered her face with her hands. I'll never forget her first words. "I didn't want you to find out like this." Like this? As if there's a good way to tell your husband that his daughter isn't his. My whole body went hot, my ears ringing. I snapped. I slammed my hand on the table so hard Lily woke up crying in her room. I lowered my voice, but my fury shook through every word. "How long, Emily? How long have you been lying to me?" She finally sat down, tears streaming, and whispered the words that made my stomach flip. "Since before we got married." I just froze. Before we got married. She told me about Mark. That he wasn't just some coworker fling. He was her ex, the one she'd never really cut off. Apparently, even while we were engaged, she'd been seeing him on and off. And when Lily was conceived, she already knew there was a chance I wasn't the father. But here's the part that crushed me most. She admitted she chose me because I was stable. Because Mark wasn't the kind of guy who could handle marriage or kids. So she stayed with me, hoping I'd never notice, hoping Lily could grow up in what she called a good home. I sat there, listening to my wife basically confess that our entire marriage had been built on a lie. That Lily wasn't just ours. She was theirs. I couldn't even speak. I just sat in silence, staring at her like she was a stranger in my house. And then she begged me. She grabbed my hands, tears streaming, and said, "Please don't leave. You're the only father she's ever known. She loves you. She needs you." That cut deep, because as much as I wanted to walk out right then, part of me still loved that little girl. But could I stay in a marriage where every smile, every "I love you," was stained with betrayal? That was the night I realized I had an impossible choice to make. The days after her confession were the darkest blur of my life. I'd go to work, sit at my desk, and just stare at my screen while my coworkers asked if I was okay. I wasn't. I was walking around with this storm inside me, and no one could see it. At home, things were worse. Emily tried to act normal, making dinner, folding laundry, kissing me goodnight, but everything between us was poisoned. Every smile felt fake, every touch felt like a lie. And then there was Lily. God, Lily. She'd run to me after daycare, shouting "Daddy," with her little arms wide open. She'd beg me to read her bedtime stories, giggling when I did the silly voices. She'd fall asleep on my chest like she always had. And the whole time, I'd feel this crack inside me. Like I was split in two. One half wanting to love her like nothing changed, the other half screaming, "She's not yours." She never was. I hated myself for even thinking that. She's innocent. She didn't ask for this. But every time I looked at her eyes, the same eyes Emily admitted belonged to him, I felt that sting. I stopped sleeping. I'd sit in the living room at 2 a.m., staring at the wall, thinking, do I stay? Do I leave? What kind of man am I if I walk away? What kind of man am I if I stay with a woman who betrayed me? Emily kept begging me to talk, but all I could give her were short, cold answers. At one point, she broke down crying on the kitchen floor, saying, "Please don't punish her for my mistake. Don't punish Lily." And the thing is, she was right. Whatever I chose, it wasn't just about me and Emily. It was about Lily too. But every time I pictured the future, school events, birthdays, graduations, I kept asking myself, could I stand there smiling, knowing another man's blood runs in her veins? Knowing her real father is out there, and I'm just the substitute? I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't sit in limbo forever. I had to make a decision. Eventually, the weight of it all pushed me toward the one thing I'd been avoiding, confronting Mark. I couldn't just sit there knowing he existed, knowing he'd been with my wife, knowing he was Lily's biological father, and do nothing. I had to look him in the eye. I had to hear it from him. So, I did something reckless. I showed up at his office. I'd heard his name enough in Emily's work stories to know where he worked, and I waited for him outside like some character in a bad movie. When he walked out, he looked exactly how I remembered him from those company parties. Smug, confident, with that polished, fake charm. The kind of guy who thinks he owns every room he walks into. I stepped right in front of him. My voice was low, steady, but shaking underneath. "We need to talk. About my wife. About Lily." For a second, He looked stunned. Then he smirked. Actually smirked. Like this was all some joke. I was wondering when you'd figure it out. That one sentence nearly made me lose it. I wanted to swing on him right there in the parking lot. But I clenched my fists and forced myself to stay calm. I asked him straight up, "Did you know Lily was yours?" And with the same smug look, he said, "Of course. I knew from the beginning. She's got my eyes." My stomach turned. I swear I almost threw up right there. But then he leaned closer, like he was enjoying twisting the knife, and said something that broke me in a whole new way. "Emily begged me to step back. She said you were the safer option, that you'd raise her better than I ever could." And I let her. Because honestly, I didn't want the responsibility. I stood there in silence, rage boiling so hot my vision blurred. He said it so casually, like he was talking about a dog he didn't want to take care of, not a child. That's when it hit me. This man was Lily's biological father, but he wasn't her dad. Not even close. And that truth twisted me in ways I wasn't ready for. Walking away from that meeting with Mark, I felt like my brain was splitting in two. On one hand, I wanted to tear him apart for the smug way he admitted everything. On the other, his words forced me to see something I hadn't before. Yeah, he was Lily's biological father, but he wasn't a dad. He didn't even want her. He said it himself. He had the DNA, but not the heart. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I realized something. Lily only knew me as her father. I was the one who sang to her when she was sick, the one who carried her on my shoulders at the zoo, the one she ran to when she scraped her knee. Mark? He was just a sperm donor with a smirk. But that didn't erase the betrayal. When I came home that night, Emily was waiting for me at the kitchen table, eyes red like she'd been crying all day. She asked where I'd been. I didn't play games. I told her straight up. I talked to him. Her face drained of all color. She whispered, "What did he say?" And that's when I unloaded. I told her everything he told me. How he knew from the start, how she begged him to step back, how he thought I was the safe option. Emily broke down. She sobbed into her hands, saying she was sorry over and over, saying she was terrified of losing me, terrified I'd find out and leave. And I'll be honest, watching her cry didn't give me satisfaction. It made me angry, not just at her, but at myself, because part of me still loved her. Part of me still wanted the family we'd built, even if it was built on lies. But another part of me wanted to burn it all down. That night, we slept in separate rooms. Lily kept asking why Mommy and Daddy weren't together in bed. And every time, I had to swallow the lump in my throat and tell her, "Daddy's just tired." But inside, I knew this couldn't go on forever. I was standing at a fork in the road. Forgive and rebuild, or leave and start over. And both paths felt like hell. The breaking point came a week later. It was a Saturday morning, and Lily had a soccer game. I went to watch her, like I always did. Emily wasn't there. She said she had a work thing, but I didn't care. I just wanted to see my little girl run around, kicking that ball like she owned the field. And then it happened. Lily scored her first goal. She turned to the stands, grinning from ear to ear, and waved. She ran straight into my arms, screaming, "Daddy, Daddy." And that's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. No DNA, no lies, no betrayal could change this. This little girl, my little girl, needed me. She didn't care whose blood was in her veins. She only cared that I was her dad. In that moment, all my anger, all my pain, all my confusion crystallized into one thought. I couldn't abandon her. Not now, not ever. When we got home, I sat Emily down. I told her everything I'd realized. That I wasn't leaving Lily, that I couldn't leave her, but that our marriage was in serious trouble. I told her she had to earn my trust back, step by step. She nodded, tears streaming, and promised she'd do whatever it took. No excuses, no lies. Just the truth from now on. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a small spark of peace. I knew the road ahead would be hard, that healing would take time. But I also knew one thing for sure. Lily was my daughter in every way that mattered, and I wasn't giving her up. Rebuilding trust with Emily wasn't easy. Every day felt like walking on a tightrope over a canyon of hurt and suspicion. Small things set me off, her phone buzzing, her taking calls in another room. But she did her best to be transparent. She left her phone on the kitchen counter, texted me when she was running late, answered every question honestly, "No, Ma." We started going to counseling together. At first, it felt forced, sitting in a room with a stranger and airing every dirty secret of our marriage. But slowly, it helped. I realized that while I couldn't undo her betrayal, I could control how I responded to it. We also made a decision for Lily. No matter what, she deserved normalcy. So Emily and I created a truth shield. For now, Lily wouldn't know anything about the paternity mess. She would know two parents who love her, period. I realized that being her dad didn't come down to DNA. It came down to every sleepless night, every scraped knee, every bedtime story. And as I watched Emily genuinely work to repair our marriage, I started to notice small things. Her touches, the way she laughed at Lily's jokes, how she tried to include me in every step of her efforts. It didn't erase the past, but it gave me hope that the future could still be something worth staying for. For the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of control return. I couldn't change the betrayal, I couldn't change the biology, but I could choose how I acted from this moment forward. And that choice mattered more than anything. The hardest part of all this wasn't just the betrayal. It was the emotional roller coaster I rode alone before I finally acted. Shock, anger, grief, rage, doubt. I felt like I'd aged 10 years in 2 months. I questioned everything about my life, about Emily, about myself. I even wondered if I could trust my own judgment ever again. But slowly, I started to understand something. Anger fades, betrayal wounds heal, but the choices you make define who you are. I could let this destroy me, or I could take the pain and turn it into something meaningful. I learned that love isn't about blood. It's about showing up, day after day, even when your heart is breaking. Lily didn't care about genes. She cared about hugs, bedtime stories, scraped knees, and being seen. That made me realize I was still a dad, no matter what. I also learned that forgiveness isn't about excusing someone else's behavior. It's about giving yourself the freedom to move forward without being trapped by their mistakes. I can't erase what Emily did, but I can decide whether it controls my life. And finally, I learned that honesty is the only foundation that can rebuild anything after betrayal. It's fragile at first, but if both people commit to it, there's a chance to heal. Life didn't magically fix itself, but it started to feel normal again. Slowly, we made small routines that mattered. Family dinners, weekend trips, reading bedtime stories to Lily together. Emily stayed fully transparent, and I worked on letting go of the suspicion that had been eating me alive. We laughed again, even if it was cautious at first. And Lily, she thrived. She didn't notice the cracks in our marriage, and I made sure she never would. I realized that being a father is less about biology and more about presence. The way she smiled when I came home, the way she threw her arms around my neck, the way she shouted "Daddy" when she scored another goal, those moments became my anchor. I also returned to work with a clearer mind. I could focus again, make decisions without the constant emotional weight pulling me down. And slowly, the anger I'd carried for Mark and Emily started to ease. Not completely gone, but manageable. We weren't perfect, and we probably never would be. But we were together, learning to navigate the mess of our past, and making a choice every day to keep trying, for ourselves and for Lily. Looking back now, I can see how much this experience changed me. I went from feeling like my life was perfectly in order to realizing that the foundation I'd built on love and trust could be shattered in a single moment. And yet, here I am, still standing, still a dad, still learning how to live with the choices I made. If there's one thing I want people to take from my story, it's this. Biology doesn't define parenthood. Being a father is about showing up, day after day, loving the child in front of you, and protecting them no matter what. It's about presence, consistency, and care, not DNA. Second, betrayal is devastating, but it doesn't have to destroy you. You can feel anger, grief, and pain, and still choose a path that honors the people who depend on you. Forgiveness isn't about excusing someone else's actions. It's about freeing yourself to move forward without letting bitterness control your life. And finally, always trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, investigate it, but do it with a clear head. Don't let fear or pride prevent you from seeking the truth. For anyone in a similar situation, my advice is this: prioritize the child. Protect the innocence and the love that exists, even if the adults around them fail. And remember that healing doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, messy, painful process, but it's worth it. I'll never forget the shock, the anger, the heartbreak, but I also won't forget the lessons it taught me about love, responsibility, and resilience. Because in the end, being Lily's dad, that's what matters most.